Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today, we have Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you today.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you this morning?
Doing well, thank you. Doing
All
well.
right.
But we have to talk about your buddy again.
Yeah, the beggar.
The Zelensky guy. And I was just telling you that a little while ago that he annoys me to no end. But I think what... then I qualified that. I said, no, I think the people who accept him and honor him and raise him to a pedestal, steal money from the American citizen, gives it to him, perpetuates a war that makes us poorer and more vulnerable than anything. Those are the people that permit it. So Zelensky, he just sees an opportunity.
Yeah,
he's just
free money.
he's just one taking advantage of being a crook. In a sort of way.
Yeah.
No, they're all. It's the best word to use for that is plunder. One group plunders some, transfers it to somebody else. In the war, you plunder the people and you enrich the warmongers and the weapons manufacturers. Anyway, Zelensky is back. I don't think he's going to talk before the Congress. It's amazing.
Not this time, yeah.
He came to. I mean, is this our part of our good news program?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Zelensky scouts a victory plan.
Yeah, he's got a plan.
Oh, we better look at that. Now, turns out it doesn't sound like victory. It sounds like desperation.
Yeah.
Can we get the last money out of the American taxpayers? So yes, he comes up with a victory plan, and it's sort of ironic because the Ukrainians are in trouble right now, and the Russians are, holding out, and they're playing a little cool hand here. So if he were truly fighting a war that made sense, he'd probably come over. Hey, look, we have a week left to go.
Yeah.
Are you going to come and send some troop to bail us out? But in a way, he's trying to scare everybody. But I can't believe this. We've mentioned this before, but he's involved in our internal politics.
Yes, he is.
He's already decided who he wants elected. So it's a mess, but the headline we looked at today from Zero Hedge, our friends there, key Ukrainian stronghold about to fall in Russia as Zelensky touts the victory plan in D.C.
Yeah.
I put me down as a skeptic.
Yeah. So he came to town. He was up at the UN General Assembly. Well, before that, he was in Scranton, Pennsylvania. We talked about that yesterday, touring an arms factory. Then he went to New York. Now he's in D.C. Now, the Biden administration said, okay, we're ready to help you, but we need a plan. We need a path to victory. So he came armed with his victory plan, and it was supposed to be kind of a 1-2 punch because a few weeks ago, we haven't talked about it very much, but the Ukrainians had an incursion into the Kursk area in Russia. They actually went into Russia and took a few villages. It's a very sparsely populated part of Russia. What this brilliant plan was supposed to do was supposed to force Putin to panic and take some troops out of the front line that were fighting over here and put them over there to save Kursk. Well, they didn't do it, and they didn't need to do it because they're defeating the Kursk incursion without using these extra troops. So they lost a lot of their key soldiers in this incursion into Kursk without anything to show for it. So he comes to town. You can put that first one on because, Dr. Paul, you talked about it. So he comes to town, and he has the victory plan that Biden demanded from him. But the victory plan itself, Dr. Paul, is more of the same. And I will summarize it. I don't even need a clip. Give me more money, number one. I need more weapons, long-range weapons. Give me permission to strike deeply into Russia with these long-range weapons. And this is the best one. Immediate NATO membership for all of Ukraine, including the Article 5 guarantees, i.e., if Russia does anything in the war zone that it's currently winning, then the rest of NATO will come in and fight my battle for me. And my note to myself was, well, why not a no-fly zone as well? Because this is basically everything that he's been saying for the entire time. You give me everything, you go to war for me, and we'll win. It's not a very, it's not a very confidence-producing.
He sounded like he was a good friend of Biden's.
Yeah.
He said everybody's looking up to Biden, and we need his help to defend ourselves, and we have to be strong. you know, it's just so much rhetoric. It's almost we see it as desperation. And the desperation is that this opportunity to start a big war and remake Europe again, it's going to be gone if he can't unite NATO. It looks like the people falling in line, you know, certainly the United States has, but the Brits and the others, and the people come up with this money and wanting to help them. And it's so bewildering to me how people who have stupid policies, evil policies, policies that violate our Constitution, we can't afford them, and we usually end up losing overall. Yeah. So here we are, but it continues, and the gullibility exists out there. So I hope that we can penetrate that someday to some degree and wake up people to be not so gullible. And I have to admit, though, we have met a lot of people now, and there are signs that people are waking up. Yeah. Boy, they have to realize that these policies are costly and are hurting American citizens, and it's very dangerous. And but the big thing is it going to be too late economically? How do you put this back together again? Yeah. Because we are in a technical fashion flat out broke.
Yeah. The thing about this new victory plan, the Article 5 demand, is almost comical. And in a way, I mean, it would be interesting to see if they did that, because the idea, because you know the little Baltics are the toughest and roughest. They've got about 10 people total in the military, you know. They're the roughest and toughest. They talk so tough. You know, much of Europe talks so tough. But it would be hilarious to see at the end of the day if they got this Article 5, and then Zelensky says, "Okay, guys, come join my war against Russia." None of them would go. Nobody would go. You know, nobody would do it. So it's almost comical. But really the optics, and you put on that second clip, because the optics of this whole trip are horrible now. The Kursk thing was a disaster. And even as we speak, go to the next one if you can, even as we speak, he's supposed to be in D.C. celebrating successes, but it's not working that way. And this is from the Hedge article. They're quoting Reuters. Russian forces have begun storming the eastern Ukrainian town of Vuhledar, a stronghold that resisted Russian attacks since the beginning of the 2022 war. Russian forces in eastern Ukraine have advanced at their fastest rate in 2 years in August, according to multiple open source maps, even though a Ukrainian incursion into Russia's Kursk region sought to force Moscow to divert troops, and I mentioned that earlier, which didn't happen. So now the New York Times, if you go to the next one, they have a big article. What is Zelensky's victory plan for Ukraine's war with Russia? And it talks about how he intends to present the plan. And if you go to the next one, this is the New York Times article, Dr. Paul. The victory plan, which Mr. Zelensky has described in news media interviews as a bridge to a future peace settlement. And this is the funny part. A strategy aimed at strengthening Ukraine's position on the battlefield enough to force Russia to the negotiating table. So as they continue to lose towns, he's under the delusion somehow that he's actually winning, and they're going to force Russia to sit down and talk.
But you know, in a way, it's a real mix-up. It's sort of crazy, because he's been getting away with this type of talk, and we've been rolling over. Yeah. And the taxpayers don't care, and it continues on and on. But he keeps doing the same thing, and the failures are out there, and he comes to here. And I can understand why he might even believe some of this stuff, because we've done it before. We've been doing it for years. We've done it with other countries. People say, "Oh, the end of the world's coming unless you send us a lot of weapons," you know, because we want to overthrow the government we have. There are all kinds of sinister things. The one thing is, it's amazing how the world has, especially in this century, this short century, has gotten away with all this expenditures, and we still can act half normal. But what I fear, and I'm sure you have concern, what's it going to be like if this continues? What's the conclusion of it? What is the plan? We know what he's talking about makes no sense, but is there a real plan? And there is one, and we generally have talked about it, but it's a Marxist plan.
Yeah.
You know, if you give any credibility to this idea that Marxism wants chaos as their best tool, that whether it's economic or whether it's social reforms here in this country or this type of stuff, they may get the chaos, because it's amazing that I thought at the end of the Cold War maybe fascism and communism was discredited. So maybe that's a driving force that we underestimate.
Yeah, exactly. Well, one final thing on this. This is a post from David Sachs. He's an entrepreneur and I think a very smart guy, very bright guy. If you can put this next one on, he gives a pretty pithy response. He says, Zelensky's in the U.S. to present his much-hyped victory plan to President Biden. What does this consist of? 1, immediate admission to NATO. 2, long-range missile strikes. In other words, World War III. Biden has already rejected both. Let's hope he can remember why. That's a good point. So now we're in for our good news story. Because if you put that next one on, this is out from Politico this morning. Zelensky was supposed to meet the Biden administration, Kamala, and all these people, but he was also supposed to meet President Trump, former President Trump. Well, Politico is reporting this morning that Trump likely won't meet Zelensky on the U.S. trip. And you could say, well, why is that? We'll go to the next one. Here's why he's not going to meet him. Trump said last week he'd probably meet with Zelensky during the U.S. visit, but a Trump campaign official confirmed to Politico on Tuesday that no meeting has been scheduled. And this is what we talked about yesterday on the show, Dr. Paul. The Ukrainian leader irritated Republican election candidate Trump by visiting a munitions factory in Scranton, in the critical swing state of Pennsylvania, on Sunday during a campaign-style stop. As we talked about yesterday, this foreigner comes in, rides in on a U.S. military jet, and essentially does a campaign rally for the Kamala Harris. And so Trump, to his credit, wisely says, okay, dude, I'm not going to meet you anymore.
You know, you might be able to question his political judgment. He comes in, you know, it looks like there's a consensus in this country right now that Kamala Harris is not going to be the next president. And if that is the case, and he thinks he has to deal with America by insulting and doing the worst thing he can do to Trump, and then Trump finally, who did want to at least talk to him and play games with him, all of a sudden, that's enough. Do you think Trump is going to all of a sudden reverse his trend and go back, yeah, I guess it is a good idea.
Yeah.
Now, I know Trump vacillates at times, but I don't think so. Trump's going to go back to this guy. And but you'd have to say that why would Zelensky do this? It doesn't make any sense. There might have, you know, with Trump in there and Trump, you know, outwardly, you know, helping, that maybe he'd hold back a little bit and hope for the best. But right now, I think the good news is it looks like Zelensky's burned his last bridge. I think it is. You know, the odds are Trump's going to be president. The odds are that Trump is not going to be their best friends or Zelensky's best friend, and the odds are that maybe the American people wake up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think what happens, Zelensky's maximalist approach, I will not have any discussion, whereas we know the cornerstone of Trump's plan is, I'm going to call up my friend Zelensky, call him a friend. You didn't say my friend, but then I'm going to call up Putin, and then we're going to make a deal. Well, Zelensky has already said no deals, no anything, only capitulation by Russia will be accepted, even as he loses town after town after town. It's someone who's delusional, you know. I mean, it's crazy. But here's something that I found, Dr. Paul, I didn't mention to you, but I knew you'd find it interesting. So he rolls in on a military jet. He does kind of a campaign stop for Kamala Harris in Pennsylvania, which is the critical state. It's coming out to be, I think, the critical state in the race. Well, it didn't escape the view of the House GOP. Let's have a look at this next one. This is from, I want to say Politico. House GOP investigates Zelensky's Pennsylvania visit. 9 House Republicans are demanding information from U.S. taxpayer funds spent on security and support for Ukrainian President Zelensky to visit a ammunition factory in Pennsylvania over the weekend. It clearly irked that the visit seemed to benefit Democrats in the swing state. So I won't read the rest of it, but the GOP did notice, and they want to know what's going on? How much of our money did you spend on this?
Yeah, maybe they'll think about the term election interference or something.
Yeah.
I mean, this is so evident, you know, that they're being involved. Maybe that's when people will let it go. Well, it must be okay. He's doing it out in the open, and they couldn't even. Well, they were sort of out in the open when you came to briefcases and you know, Russiagate.
Yeah.
That was so open and evident, but it was still the people. Well, the propagandists on the other side did a pretty good job of maintaining interest in that nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, if I could write a little thing for Trump, because the whole point of this was Zelensky going to these workers in this factory. I think they made 155 millimeter shells. The whole point was for him saying, you guys are going to keep your blue collar jobs, you know, if Kamala Harris is elected, because we're going to keep this war going. You know, Trump could literally say, this is one of our very few factories that manufacture these ammo. Thanks to these dunderheads, we don't have any left, so you're still going to have a job because we have to replace all the stuff they gave away. You know, he could still do that, but anyway. So the last one we want to talk about is a tweet by Donald Trump this morning, or yesterday. It really caught my attention. Very, very troublesome, troubling on a number of levels. Put this one up. This is Trump tweeting out yesterday. Big threats on my life by Iran. The entire U.S. military is watching and waiting. Moves were already made by Iran that didn't work out, but they will try again. Not a good situation for anyone. I'm surrounded by more men, guns, and weapons than I've ever seen before. Thank you to Congress for unanimously approving more money for the Secret Service. 0 no votes, strictly bipartisan. Nice to see Republicans and Democrats get together on something. An attack on a former president is a death wish for the attacker. So what happened is Trump was briefed about the fact that no, this wasn't some dude on the roof. This wasn't some kooky guy in the woods trying to shoot you. These were actually an Iranian plot to assassinate the president, which is so preposterous. And if I can just have your indulgence for a second, thankfully, Julie Kelly, who we've had on the show, she's a very canny investigative reporter. She spilled the beans on this whole thing. Put this next one up. Thanks to Julie Kelly, she did that this morning. She said, the woman in the yellow square is Avril Haines. To the left is Susan Rice. To the right is current Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco. Rice called Haines and Monaco her, quote, sisters. Haines is now Biden's Director of National Intelligence. She briefed Trump yesterday on Iranian threats against him. So it was Avril Haines who came in there, and it gets worse, though. Go to the next one if you can. It gets worse, Dr. Paul. Thanks to Julie again. In her first act as Biden's Director of National Intelligence, she released a report on the heightened threat of domestic violent extremists, i.e. Trump supporters. She hates Trump. She hates Trump supporters, but she's the one who briefed him, oh, it's Iran. Go to the final one on this, Dr. Paul. I know you're going to want to weigh in on it. Final one that she did on this, if you go to the next one, it gets even worse, Dr. Paul. She worked directly for John Brennan.
Oh, gosh.
She attended his secret meetings in the White House in 2016 to concoct the Russia collusion hoax. Is there an Iranian threat against Trump? Maybe. Is there any reason to trust Haines on this? Absolutely not. So talk about good work for Julie.
You know, and there's a lot to be said about thinking about who hates Trump.
Yeah.
Because they could claim there's people in Iran hates Trump, and that's very plausible.
Yeah.
Because they've had a few people assassinated by allies, or maybe even us directly. But this is something that the people realize that. That this is not going to solve their problem, because the hatred is there. They could have just said, you know, where's the hatred coming from? You know, it's the neocons hatred.
Yeah.
It's the you know, radical progressives that just do it. They all there. You could do this if it was just a matter of that. But the strategy there, I'm not sure what the strategy was, because it turned out to be a joke.
Yeah.
You know, the whole thing, because maybe they didn't think Trump would respond that way.
It's very disappointing that Trump would take this at face value, because she is one of the authors of the Russia collusion, Russiagate hoax. That was her thing.
Yeah.
And now she's trying to sell the Iran collusion hoax. The idea, anything is possible, okay? I don't know the mind of the Iranian leaders, but the idea that they would take such a preposterously dangerous move. If anything, the Iranian leadership, now look, we're in the middle of the Hezbollah war. Israel is attacking Iran's great ally in Lebanon, Hezbollah. They've attacked Iran's ally in Hamas. They're attacking Iran's ally in Syria, and Iran is doing nothing. So they're sitting by and watch this happening, but they're going to take an unbelievably high-risk move of trying to kill Trump. It just doesn't add up.
That wouldn't help them very much, you know. But anyway.
What would be the gain of it? You know, what would be the gain? It's insane. So, I mean, Trump is disappointing. It's just like before. He's listening to these neocons all around him. Yeah,
and the only thing he will change his mind, but there's a limit to what he's going to do. It's a little bit confusing. That's why we talk here about starting off with a basic principle, you know, of non-intervention, and not trying to be partisan or special interests and money made here. And the principle should be based on the Constitution and non-aggression. It should be based on natural, you know, law, and you can come up with answers like this. But to do this, and you know, under that system that I'm talking about, you're not supposed to lie, you know. That rule's been around for as long as history's been here. That there's something evil and wrong about lying and cheating and stealing and killing. So you don't have it. So you have to violate that, and they come up with this. It just compounded, and look at the mess the world generally is in. And yet it seems to me so sad, because there's still a lot of people in this country and around the world, the average person would like to be just left alone.
Yeah.
But the propagandists and the conditions and the scaremongering and the fear and everything that's built is carried out by a minority of people. Yeah, the leaders in even when the Soviets and the communists took over Russia, or even, matter of fact, you use this analogy when we went to war against the British. If you did a polling back then, at the beginning there was no 80% of they didn't like the British, and they would like it to happen, but they weren't saying I'm ready, let's go to war. So it doesn't work that way. But right now, I think that the message that the non-interventionists get is not very good. That's why we try to improve ourselves every single day to get that message out.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention this one thing. And I think you have a comment on that. It's from our friend Dave DeCamp, and he just points out once again this is back to the Lebanon issue, and the Lebanon health minister spoke out. He says the majority, if not all, of the recent killings done by Israel, of all 558 killed by Israel, were civilian, and children involved, the whole thing. So, but that does not, and right, once again, trying to have a balanced understanding of this. We are not guiltless. I mean, our country has been involved, even when the defense of our country was justified. But some of the procedures that we have, I mean, when you think of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and many times that civilians were targeted, you know, and they knew that the civilians were killed. But that's the way it happens. But this is just another aggravation. Yeah, and I think it's almost 1,000 Lebanese people killed by today after 3 days now of strikes. And imagine if any other country in the world had just started attacking its neighbor and killed 1,000 people. You know, there would be outrage. The UN Security Council would be meeting. You know, one thing is, I think we have some mixed up psychology here. And and we all of a sudden have become the humanitarians. We don't protect our borders. We open them up, kick out American citizens, give them a hotel room, and free everything. And say that, well, that's the answer to what you're complaining about. No, that is not the answer. You know, a little bit of common sense is necessary.
It'll go a long way. Well, I'm going to close out. I'm going to thank everyone for watching the show. I'm going to ask you to please hit thumbs up or like or whatever you see on your screen as you're watching this currently. Just subscribe and please pass the show around so that other people can watch the show. We try to do our best to give you some decent insights that you can use every day, and we thank you for coming to join us. Over to you, Dr. Paul.
Very good. And I think within a couple days, maybe a couple weeks, or eventually, we're going to see an explosion of information coming out of what Zelensky is doing. He's starting to lose credibility, and his war is not going well. And if the American people, I mean, there's still a lot of people in the neocon category and have the power to get him more money, but eventually, though, the money won't work and something will happen, and I think people will realize that our working with and pretending that Zelensky's our best friend cancels out the whole thing that happened in 2014, and people ought to look at that because we were very much involved in starting that war in Ukraine, and we should assume the responsibility for it. And until we look at this in an honest way and see both sides of the issue, and the toughest job is to critique and criticize one's own government. But I say that is a patriotic thing to do as long as people have done their homework and know what they're talking about. And we've already mentioned a couple names today of people who do their homework and give us the information, because the whole answer to this, other than expanding the war, would be the evaluation and exposure of truth. Then things could get better in this effort to move toward peace and prosperity. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.